I have something so cool to share with you, and I know you're going to love it because I shared something called the let them theory in an Instagram post less than a week ago. And I just looked it up. There are over 14 million views of this thing, which always tells me when something goes that viral that it strikes a nerve. And in this post, it's just a quick selfie video, and I'm explaining what's called the let them theory. It is a game changer, and that's what we're going to talk about in today's episode. But to just tee this up, since this went so viral, I want you to hear what I said in this selfie video on Instagram. Check this out. I just heard about this thing called the let them theory. I freaking love this. If your friends are not inviting you out to brunch this weekend, let them. If the person that you're really attracted to is not interested in a commitment, let them. If your kids do not want to get up and go to that thing with you this week, let them. So much time and energy is wasted on forcing other people to match our expectations. And the truth is, if somebody, especially somebody you're dating or who's a friend or somebody you're trying to partner with in business, if they are not showing up how you need them to show up, do not try to force them to change. Let them be themselves because they are revealing who they are to you. Just let them. And then you get to choose what you do next. The let them theory. It's so obvious. And once you learn it, you are going to use it so many times a day. It's just going to blow your mind because the let them theory is going to allow you to detach yourself from the things that cause a lot of struggle and angst and emotion to come up when you get controlling. The let them theory also allows you to let go of the reins and give space for other people to take responsibility. Let them do it. And finally, what you're going to learn is that the let them theory, it is incredible because when you let somebody just be who they actually are, and you stop trying to make them something else, you realize in so many friendships and so many relationships, you actually are in love with their potential. You're not in a relationship with who the person really is. And you've been so busy controlling and trying to change them that you don't even recognize that you're in a relationship with their potential. And when you let somebody be who they actually are, wow, it allows you to understand who you're actually dealing with. So I can give you a quick example of the let them theory in play because it works for things big and small. And I will tell you, this is something that I have to use all the time. Just this weekend, it was our son Oakley's prom. He's a junior in high school. And here we are in southern Vermont. And I'm used to doing prom a certain way because we raised our daughters outside of Boston in a suburban town. They're also daughters, so they were more controlling. They were organizing everything. It was a community where I knew all the families, all the kids, the traditions were locked in. Everybody knows everybody else. And so here we are in this new town in southern Vermont, and Oakley's going to the prom with somebody we've never met, don't know her parents. We don't know any of the traditions here, and it doesn't seem like there are a lot of them, honestly. But one of the traditions that was present is that there were girls that were organizing groups of people to come to their house for pre-prom photos. So we go to this person's house, and it was really great to meet everybody, didn't know a soul there. We get there, and I'm standing there with Oakley, and it starts to rain. And not just rain, it is like a torrential downpour. The kind of storm where you go, that really sucks. You know, it really sucks. Like you are going to look like you have taken a shower if you walk out the front door of this house and try to walk 20 feet through this rain to get to your car. That's how hard it was pouring rain. And so they're standing there, and it's about 5 o'clock at night. Prom starts at 7, and the kids start talking. So what do you want to do for dinner? And I look at Oakley and I say, you guys don't have a reservation somewhere? He goes, no. And I then said, well, what are you going to do? Do you want me to call? And I start then jumping in, right? And over functioning with my anxiety, which we have talked about before on this podcast, the do. And the kids are kind of gathering around, and somebody goes, well, why don't we go to Avocado Pit? Now, Avocado Pit, just to put this in context, is this amazing little, amazing taco place, right? It's got maybe 6 tables in it. It's tiny. It's like the size of one stall of a garage. So we're talking 1-car parking place. And there are 20 kids in tuxedos and long dresses, dressed to the nines. It is a torrential downpour outside. And their plans for prom are to go to a fast casual joint in the center of town that could maybe have 6 of them standing inside. And I immediately start going, you can't go to Avocado Pit. You're going to get wet. What about? I am controlling. I'm that person. And my daughter turns to me and she says, Mom, if they want to go to Avocado Pit, let them. It's his prom. It's not your prom. Let them. And when she said, let them, it's as if I just went hands off. It was this little cue that was like, okay, you're doing that thing. Just turn from controlling everything, Mel, and let the current of what's happening take you in a different direction. And immediately what happens when you adopt the let them theory is that you are able to catch yourself when you're controlling people, and you don't need to be. You are able to drop into a more surrender, peaceful feeling instead of letting your emotions rev you up. And it kind of begs the question, right? Because I've been thinking about this. Why did the let them theory? Why is it so resonant for people? Why did 14 million people in a matter of a week watch and share that video? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because every single one of us struggles with controlling behavior, or we struggle with controlling thoughts. And the let them theory is a way that you can check yourself so that your controlling nature or your controlling or obsessive thoughts don't control you. Because the reason why we do this, we control other people or we just can't let it go. Like, have you ever been in a situation where maybe your buddies organize a golf trip and they don't include you? Or the women in your life go away for a weekend and you're not invited? Or a friend that you adore is dating a real asshole, somebody who's horrible for them. Let them. I mean, how much does you worrying about it, how is that going to change anything? It's not. How does spending 200 hours talking to your friend about this horrible person over and over and over, how does that help? It doesn't. Let them. If somebody's firing you, let them. If your company's going through layoffs, let them. It is so liberating when you drop the sword, when you just let go. And there's this really interesting analogy that's going to help you that comes from a psychologist. I've got a ton of notes for this. You're going to hear me doing my notes because I want to get this right because there's so many tools because this does not come naturally to us. And I'm going to explain why. There's a psychologist, Dr. Amy Johnson, who uses this example. And I think we can keep coming back to this visual. When you tip into that control mode, and we all do it. I mean, come on, you can kind of go, oh God, Mel, let the kids get a burrito for crying out loud. But don't you dare tell me that if the roles were reversed, you wouldn't have questioned the decision to not have a reservation, first of all, before prom. And secondly, to then want to go to some burrito bar, right? In the middle of a rainstorm. But I digress. Here is the visual from Dr. Amy Johnson. She says, whenever you go into control mode, imagine that you are in a tiny, tiny boat and you're paddling upstream. You are paddling against the current. It is hard to paddle against the current. It is a fight. That is what it feels like when you're controlling other people, right? Or you're trying to control them. That's what it felt like for me at this pre-prom party. Because as these kids are casually talking about driving over to the avocado pit and grabbing a bite to eat, I've got my oars and I'm fighting against that current. And I'm like, but you should have had other things. But what about this? But you're going to get your date's going to get her dress wet. What the fuck, Mel? So what Dr. Johnson says is that when you catch yourself doing it, you are fighting against the current. You are literally paddling up emotion inside of you and resistance and frustration because it's frustrating when you can't control the people around you, right? It's frustrating. It doesn't create more control. It actually makes you feel less in control. What she says is you must let go and surrender. And so she'll visualize Just hands off the oars, drop the oars. And what happens is the boat in that situation, what does it do? It turns around. And instead of going upstream, when you drop the oars, the boat naturally just floats downstream with the current of how things are going. And you will notice the same thing. That instead of fighting what's happening, you are able to drop the oars and just surrender to what's going on, which creates peace and ease for you. Because does it matter if Oakley and his friends want to go to the avocado pit? Of course not. Who gives a shit? In fact, it might be the most memorable part of prom. Standing in the pouring rain, all of them crowded in this restaurant, ordering tacos before the thing. And so the bigger point here is I don't think any of us are aware of just how much energy and effort and time we waste on shit that we're trying to control. And the let them theory is a lever that you can pull so you can create more peace and ease and love and all of it in your life so you can float with the current of things instead of battling it so far. And the reason why we have this controlling nature is, believe it or not, it's a form of anxiety. When you are overbearing on people, maybe you're an overbearing parent. We have a lot of people who write into this show whose parents are immigrants to the United States, and they were completely overbearing. Why? Well, because of two reasons. Number one, they probably had a lot of fears. There was a lot of uncertainty. They wanted you to succeed. They wanted you to fit in. They wanted you to have the best of everything and more opportunities than they did. And so they pushed you and pushed you and pushed you and pushed you. And the second reason why people do that is because they think it's a form of love. That if I push you, if I look out for the best for you, if I think about all the things that could go wrong and I micromanage you, don't forget your umbrella, don't forget your lunch, do this, do that, be this kind of major, that you think you are looking out for the best for somebody. But what you're actually doing is you're suffocating people. The second reason why we are also controlling and why you need the let them theory is because it's easier to focus on other people. You trick yourself into thinking that you're going to be in control if you can control other people. It doesn't work that way because you can't control other people. You can manipulate them. You can guilt them. You can shame them. You can compliment them, you can love them, but you can't control them, okay? You can just try to. The person that you can control is yourself. And every time you use the let them theory, you immediately reverse the focus of that control on everybody else. And you turn it back on yourself. I'll give you an example of that. Let's say that your friends have gone away this weekend, okay? And your feelings are hurt. If you sit there and worry about it, why did they it left me out? I feel left out. I'm always left out. What did I do wrong? Blah, 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 blah. Maybe I should text them. Maybe I should say something. Maybe I should. No. You know what you should do? You should let them go away. You should let them go away. And you should stop focusing on what they're doing. Because all this obsessing about it and thinking about what you need to do in order to control what's happening, it's not working. And secondly, it's distracting you from what you really need to do, which is put the focus back on yourself. As you're sitting there, ask yourself, well, if I'm this upset by it, what do I need to do to make sure that I am proactive about friendships, that I'm the one organizing these things? That's where the real power is. And finally, the reason why we engage in such controlling behavior and these obsessive thoughts is because oftentimes it distracts us from the truth. Oftentimes, when you are, I stop and think a little bit about this situation with Oakley and the prom, and it's really dumb, but there's a very deep underlying thing that was going on. I've gone through 4 prom experiences with our daughters in a public high school outside of Boston. And it was not like the prom here. And I think all of the things that felt unfamiliar reminded me that I'm in a new place. We got home from that pre-prom photo party. I turned to Chris and I said, I'm really kind of sad because I miss knowing all the kids. And I miss knowing all the parents. And I miss seeing kids that I have known since they were in diapers, all grown up in tuxes. and I think I'm just kind of sad. And I'm controlling where Oakley is going to eat because that was something that was always part of the prom experience back home. And so a lot of times the controlling or the obsessing is triggered by the way you think things should be or the way that you're used to things being. And you're uncomfortable with the uncertainty, which is why you jump in and you do this. And so that's where the let them theory comes in. I'm teaching you a theory called the let them theory that is something that I use nonstop. My kids also use this when I become an overbearing mother. And I had just explained that the let them theory is used in a moment where you feel yourself ramping up the control. You're just wrapped around the axle. Your knickers are in a pinch. You can't believe so-and-so did such and such a, or you're just thinking about it. Why didn't they invite me? Why does everybody get together? Why does my roommate always do this? She was in town and she didn't call me. Let them. Let them. Other people get to be themselves. Other people get to make decisions. The let them theory is a way for you to address your own anxiety about uncertainty. It is a way for you to let people be who they are. It is a way for you to get out of other people's business and stick to your own business. And it is a way for you to create emotional peace, to not whip yourself into a frenzy, to not care about things that are really not your concern, and to stop this reflexive need to control or comment on everyone around you. I just, when I looked at the post that we did on Instagram, there were 9,800 comments this morning on this thing. It's only been up for a week. That's how much this struck a nerve. 9,800 comments in 1 week. That's incredible. Here's a great comment. Let people be who they are, because sometimes you need that person that way. So let them. It doesn't have to be everything, a bad thing or anything. It's so true. I think about that with my husband. I used to get so annoyed because the guy's a slow processor. Just really, like, you can almost hear the wheels turning as he's thinking about something. And he asks a lot of questions. And it used to drive me fucking crazy. I just would be like, could you spit it out? You're like, what are you thinking about? And I realized I need him to be that way because I am moving at the speed of light. One of us has to have our feet on the ground. One of us has to be thinking through decisions. One of us has to make sure that the bills get paid and the dog gets to the vet and that the things that we're doing are thought through. And so I use the let them theory to just let Chris be who he is and stop making him wrong and stop trying to control him. And it certainly creates more peace for him. And it also allows me to be more present. So let's talk about the 3 ways that you are going to use the let them theory in your life. The first one is detachment. Use the let them theory to detach yourself from the emotional or mental struggle that you can get yourself into when you're thinking about either what other people are doing or how things should be going, and to just tap in to emotional peace. Sufama, I'm saying it wrong, wrote this on Instagram. I've wasted a lot of time, Mel, and energy feeling inadequate due to my expectations of other people. It hurts. Yet I've learned to make the conscious choice to keep doing me regardless of their behavior. It's fucking hard to be good at this. It requires practice. And you know what else I think it requires? When you realize this strikes a nerve for all of us, that we all have trouble with this, because of course you have expectations. I'll give you an example. Have you ever gone to a wedding? And it's a wedding where a lot of your friends from college or a certain period of your life are going to be there, and you're so excited because you think that you're all going to be seated together? This always happens to me and Chris. Always. And you go to the wedding and you go up to that beautiful display that people do now where everybody's cards are in a place to find out where you're sitting, and you pull out your card and you're like, oh, we're at table 11. Where are you guys? You're like, we're at table 3. We're at table 4. Or we're at table 4. We're at table 11 too. And you realize all your friends are sitting together but you. And in those moments, I want to try to switch cards. I want to make the bride and groom wrong. I want to... Let them. Let them. It's their wedding. Let them do what they want. Instead of feeling hurt, instead of feeling bummed, instead of looking over that table across the dance floor longingly and thinking, why the fuck am I with the second aunt and the cousins? Oh, I know, because I can talk to anybody. I can see it right now. They're sitting there. Oh, Mel and Chris can talk to anybody. We'll stick them over here. As I'm looking longingly across the dance floor and I'm making up a story, they're having way more fun. No, let them. Let the bride and groom do what they needed to do. Let the friends do what they're needing to do. Just let them. Because does that emotional turmoil that you create inside yourself, does it actually help you enjoy the way? No. Does it change where you're sitting? No. So let them. It's like a form of radical acceptance, and it is hard. It's hard because I think we default to holding on to our expectations or holding on to feeling hurt or wronged or having an opinion about how things should. It's too hot. Why are they doing it? Let them. Let them. If United Airlines wants to board from the back of the plane, let them. Who cares that you paid extra for extra legroom? You're still going to get it. Let them do what they need to do. Here's another comment. A friend told me that she was so upset and disappointed that another friend had gone without her on a trip that she thought that they were supposed to take together. My God, was she fixated on it. She just couldn't let it go. This is the perfect opportunity to tell your friend about the let them theory. Have you heard about the let them theory? When your friend does something that upsets you, let them. I mean, for all you know, it's not that they didn't want to go with you. It's that they just needed time alone. So let them take the trip alone. Why do you have to be so offended about everything? Why do you have to be so fucking hurt about everything? Not everything's that serious or that deep, everybody. Let people do what they need to do. That's detachment. And I think it's very straightforward. You're upset about something. You're talking about something. You're griping about something. You're feeling hurt about something. Use the let them theory. And, you know, just for those of you that are kind of smarty pants and you're going to write in and be like, but what about if you're at the beach and they leave their shoes on the beach and you're what? You just let them leave the shoes on the beach? No. You're not upset about it, are you? Of course you're going to turn to your friend and be like, hey, dumbass, you left your flip-flops over there. Go get them. You're not going to let them do that. I'm talking about when you're getting yourself worked up about something. You're getting yourself annoyed about something. And I can give you another example. You know, when I first moved to Vermont, we moved here, you know, in March of 2020, say no more. And so there were travel restrictions for a couple years, and that limited anybody's ability to visit us. But it's now going on Oakley's junior year, and my parents have still yet to visit. And I was really hurt by this and really upset by it, thinking, wait a minute, like he's now a junior in high school and they haven't come to see where we live. And I kept saying, just let them. Just let them. They have their reasons. Just keep inviting them and let them. And what I finally realized, because instead of being upset about it, I just had a conversation with my mom about it, is she said, I just don't like that state. And I said, why? And she told me the story about how when she was really little, her parents left her at the family farm with her grandmother, and they went to the state of Vermont with her older sister to do something related to an eye surgery. And while they were gone, my great-grandmother dropped dead next to my mom. And when my grandparents, her parents, came home, one of the first things they said to her is, why didn't you save her? And so when I see that story, I see this isn't about me. This is about something else. Let people do what they need to do. When you give people the space to do things in a way that makes them feel comfortable, eventually they come around. And sure enough, they're going to be here in a month, and I can't wait. But you got to let them. Let them have the space to sort through their stuff. So let's talk about the second way you're going to use this theory. And this can be a little trickier because this is the let them theory. When you really need to take a step back and you got to let people fail. And you've got to give people the room to grow, the room to learn, and the room to take personal responsibility for something in their life. And I'm going to give you a couple examples of this. So when our son was in 5th grade, he went to this incredible school outside of Boston that focuses on language-based learning differences. So like dyslexia, dysgraphia, that kind of stuff. And I'll never forget, they said, if you forget their lunch, don't bring it. They're not going to go hungry, but don't bring it. Because so much of what we're trying to teach them is that they are capable of creating systems to remember things. And if they constantly forget things and you rescue them, they're never going to learn that. It's in the forgetting, it's in the sting, it's in the consequence of not doing something that you learn that this is important to you, and you create systems and processes to actually do it. And so if they forget their lunch, let them do it. If they forget an application deadline for a job, let them forget. Why? Because they needed to learn that lesson. And here's the hardest application of this on the planet. If you have somebody in your life that's struggling with addiction, anybody who has dealt with this will tell you, nobody gets sober until they're ready to. And so if somebody is not ready to go to rehab, let them. If you force them to go, they're just going to leave. If somebody relapses, let them. It's not until they tell you that they're ready for help that they are going to actually use the help that you give them. And this is a really, really, really hard thing to grasp in your life. Let them. Just let them. And it's important because every time that you bail your sister out who's terrible with money and you loan her money, you know what happens? She continues to be terrible with money. Sometimes you need the sting of 11 bounce checks or the lien on the house, which is what happened to Chris and I back in, 2000, whatever. I remember he asked his brother to loan him some money and he said, I'm sorry. If me not giving you this money is the reason why the business fails and you go bankrupt, then so be it. But I can't bail you out. You got to figure out how to do this yourself. He let Chris fail. And it was one of the most important things in the world. Why? Because he wasn't responsible for Chris's failure. Chris was. And he wasn't responsible for rescuing him. Chris was. And when you constantly rescue people, you're teaching them that they're not capable of rescuing themselves. And so the next time you get that whiny phone call from somebody that needs money or somebody that forgot something or somebody that wants to transfer yet again, don't control the situation. Simply hear them out and say, if you want to do that, great. I'll support you by cheering you on. But you're going to have to do the paperwork. You're going to have to figure out how to get out of debt. You're going to have to come to me when you're ready to get clean. You gotta let them do it themselves. And here's one more thing on that. Every time you rescue somebody, you rob them of the opportunity to grow. Every time you step in and you make the problem go away, you make the person a little weaker and more dependent on you. So if you truly want somebody to tap into the strength inside themselves, yes, there is a time to support people. But if somebody keeps relapsing, if somebody keeps forgetting their lunch, if somebody keeps dating the same toxic fucking person, let them. Because eventually it's not going to work. And then they're going to come to you and ask for help. And when they do, they'll be ready to accept it. And, for you people pleasers out here, like Ann Waters, who commented on my Instagram post, she says, but Mel, I'm a people pleaser. And I keep doing lots of stuff for other people. How the heck do I stop doing that? The let them theory. Let them do it themselves. Let your kids do their laundry and have the jeans bleed into the sweatshirts and have it all be that kind of weird bluish gray color. Let them do that. Let them learn that they actually care about doing it right. Let everybody at work go without having their birthdays celebrated. Why do you have to be the one that remembers it and brings all the cupcakes? Just let them. Let your brother host the holidays this year. Why do you have to bend yourself over backwards? Let them step up. Let your friends make the plans. Why do you have to be the one that makes the plans all the time? And finally, work. If you feel like you take on everybody's work, let them do their own job. it's certainly going to be easier on you when you use the let them do it theory. Oh, it's your presentation. You're behind the ball. I'm sorry. I've got these 55,000. I wish I could help, but I'm going to let you keep that on your plate. Thank you very much. And this one is really difficult. Let them be themselves. Let's say it again. Let the people in your life be who they are, and let them be who they're not. See, I think that we all make the mistake of getting into relationships, and we're not really in a relationship with the person as they are. We're in a relationship with the potential. And when you focus on someone's potential and you start to try to control and manipulate and want them to reach that potential or change or be different, you're not letting them be themselves. And that not only sucks for the other person, because there's nothing that feels good about being on the receiving end of that. Don't wear those shoes. You need an umbrella. Why are you doing that? Well, you should train with that. You should lose some weight. Why are you eating gluten? Come on. Won't you go to this movie with me? Why do you have to always do that thing? That doesn't feel good, does it? So stop doing it to other people. Let them be themselves. And stop and think. Are you truly in a relationship with the person as they are? Or are you in a relationship with who you wish they were? And you know that that's true if you're constantly in your mind griping about what you wish they would change instead of letting them be themselves. And if you can catch this, that you're always dating the potential, that you're always in a friendship that you hope will improve, you'll realize that you're not even present with the person as they are. And when you give somebody the freedom to be themselves, guess what happens? You see who they really are. I can think of a lot of relationships that I've been in where I spent a lot of time griping about behaviors I didn't like. And when you distract yourself by griping about the fact that they drink too much or they have a drug problem or, they're not as ambitious as you'd like, or you wish they worked out, or you can't stand their short hair and you wish they grew it longer, or you hate their family, or you don't like that thing that they do, or the sex is really bad, you're not really with them. You're so focused on all the things that you don't like and the things that you wish you would change that you're in a relationship with the things you don't like because that's what you're focused on. And when you distract yourself like that, it keeps you from addressing the reality. And the reality is you're probably not with somebody that you actually want to be with. You've just kept yourself busy griping about what you wish would change and deluding yourself into thinking that it actually might change. It's not going to. You got to let them be who they are so that you can deal with the reality of who someone is. And when you finally deal with the reality of who someone is, then you can make a great choice about who you really are and what you really need. And, there was one thing that I forgot to mention that I think is really, really important, and it has to do with relationships. And one way that we try to control other people is through jealousy. And if this is something that you struggle with, you need the let them theory. Because jealousy, if you're jealous of, let's say, your partner spending time with their kids from another marriage, if you're jealous of when your boyfriend goes off and plays golf with his friends, if you're jealous of when your girlfriend or your wife is spending more time with the kids and they're bonding over, this is a major problem. Because jealousy in this regard, this is your attempt to control other people. Because when you get jealous about your partner spending time with their kids from the first marriage, your jealousy is an attempt to try to get them to stop doing that. And so I want to unpack this because you need the let them theory. You need to let people have their friendships and have their time with their kids and have close friendships with people of the same sex. That's important. And it's important to let them do that without you getting triggered. And here's why. Because when you feel jealous and you're trying to control somebody and stop them from hanging out with their girlfriends or whatever the hell it may be, or friends from their former marriage, and that really threatens you. The reason why you feel jealous is you're threatened. And you're telling yourself that they don't love you as much as those other people, or that they're not going to love you if they hang out with those people. And what's interesting about that is your jealousy and your controlling is an attempt to get more love. But it backfires, doesn't it? Because you're not present to love when you're jealous. You're actually present to less control and less love. So if you want more love, which is why you're jealous, then let them do what they're going to do and bring more love to the situation. By letting them do what they're going to do and spend time with their kids and spend time playing golf or spend time on that project that they're working on, you're showing them that you love them as they are. It's an act of love to let people do what makes them feel good. And so, A, you're no longer feeling that toxic emotion of jealousy. B, you're giving somebody the most loving gift that you can, which is accepting who they are and supporting what makes them happy. And C, ultimately, if you keep practicing this, you're going to get what you wanted all along, which is the feeling of more love in your life because you've let go and you've accepted what is. And when you let go and accept what is, that person's going to love you back more. See how this works? Let them. Let them. And the final example that I'm going to give you is let people have their emotions. Let them have their opinions. You trying to control what somebody feels and what they say, that is a one-way ticket to the end of a relationship. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that you and your best friend have started to grow apart. Maybe one of you moved away. Maybe one of you are in a really serious relationship and the other one's single. The patterns of your life have started to change. Hence, your relationship starts to change. You still care about one another, but you just don't see each other as much. And let's just say that your friend comes to you and says, I feel like you've changed. I feel like I'm not important anymore. I feel like I've always been there for you and you're never there for me anymore because you're so busy with your boyfriend or you're so busy with this, that, and the other thing. Let them have those feelings. You don't need to control what they think. One of the greatest acts of generosity and love that a human being can give to another human being is to just listen to what somebody's story is, to witness somebody's feelings about something and validate it. That's it. That's all you need to do. And when somebody is given the space because you let them share how they're feeling, they're mad at you, they're upset about you, they're frustrated with this, they feel wrong, they feel hurt, they feel this, they feel that. Something amazing happens. You learn this skill of being able to detach. You learn how to let people be upset and not put your hooks into it. You learn the ability to have feelings rise and fall. It just happened to me this morning, in fact, because I had told our daughter Kendall, who's home for a couple weeks, that I would love to do something this morning together. And the morning, of course, came and a lot of stuff happened. And then it was 10 o'clock and she was going to help me go through some things in my closet. And she started to go, we got to get going on this because if we don't get going on this, we're only going to be doing it for 15 minutes. And if we only do it for 15 minutes, I'm going to have a fucking attitude, okay? Because I'm going to feel really pissed off about it. You know what I did? I let her. I let her have that frustration. It was so liberating. Because I realize now that I know the let them theory, that I was often engaging in this emotional tug of war with people in my life. They'd get upset. I'd try to calm them down. Then they'd get more upset. Then I'd try to be responsible for why they're upset. Then I'm trying to solve it. Then they're doing, and it just becomes this. Nobody's letting anybody do anything. We're arguing over how we feel. It is so fucking stupid. The let them theory allows you to observe people's emotional distress and let them have it and let you off the hook from rescuing them or being responsible for it. It is such a beautiful thing. That's my gift to you today, the let them theory. Because when you let somebody be free to be who they are in their best and their worst moments, that freedom that you're giving to somebody else, that gift of not controlling, you know what happens? You get a gift in return. You get peace and ease back in your life. And the more that people realize that around you, they have the freedom to express themselves and the freedom to show up as themselves, guess what? The less you're going to need to control people. And the more you're going to focus on you. So this is a question from Avery.
Hi, Avery.
Okay, yeah, Oakley's on this one.
Okay.
Oakley, you're young.
Okay. I'm listening to the episode where Mel talks about her daughter's love life dilemma with Kendall. And I have immediate request for an episode. I have a 4-year-old daughter, and I want her to feel comfortable talking to me about these kinds of issues when she's in college. So here's the pitch. How do you raise kids who share information about their lives with you? Can you give people a tool that you could use? Like, is there a takeaway?
I think that the tool that you can use is a warm and excited and interested invitation to asking your kids about their life and showing genuine interest in their life. And I think that in that interest, it like makes your kids want to tell you more in an authentic way.
But I also want to say that I think continuing to ask and continuing to be interested, continuing to be welcoming is very important. But if they are not like receptive, don't take that as just never asking. Again, I think continue to ask, continue to be interested, but there are times in life when they will not want to tell you, and you need to be respectful of that. And I think it's when parents often overstep and won't stop asking and have to know that.
So that's a great point, is that a parent can comfortably be okay with not hearing anything in response.
Yes.
Just keep asking.
That silence does not need to be misinterpreted as deafening and that there's something wrong, but just that.
Because asking lets them know we're here, we want to listen, we love you.
I have a question from Indre, who has a 3.5-year-old, and she's worried that she's going to screw up her kids by saying something or doing something wrong. And she wants to know, how do you not do that? And I just want to take a stab at this, because I think one of the things that Dad and I have done well is we have screwed up. We have said things wrong, and we are not perfect, but we're really fast and good at apologizing and taking responsibility for the things that we do wrong, or the things that we realize we regret in hindsight, or for doing things that may have hurt your feelings. I think that that's like, if you realize you're just a good person and you're doing the best that you can with whatever you got in terms of your own issues, and you're quick to take responsibility for them, I think it does show that you're open and that you're human and that you're trying. And I don't know.
I agree. Dad, do you have
Next
anything
question.
to say about that?
Yeah, I think that there's, I mean, transparency is big, and sort of leading by your own example and us being willing to share what's so about us, I think it's a good example that can only help in maybe a child wanting to do the same back towards their own parents. But it is fascinating to, even in this conversation, to be hearing about like things that we might think we did well or didn't do well, and you having a completely different interpretation about that.
Yeah.
Because you're naturally at a different age and have a different perspective. And anyway, it sort of makes me think this is all well and good, and ages and differentiation, like that's things are going to get misinterpreted along the way.
Yeah. Another big thing, Indre, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong, beautiful name, by the way, is honest communication. Like, as parents, be in honest communication with each other, and with your kids, be in honest communication. Like,
What does that mean?
Telling them what's going on, telling them about your day, making sure, like, I feel like you guys were so open and honest in your communication with us, and you would always tell us what was going on or why something was happening, or if we asked a question you would always tell us. And I think that watching you two be honest with one another like inspires us to want to be honest with you. And another thing too, like under the umbrella of honest communication is like I have so many vivid memories of like growing up as a family, like sitting around the fireplace or sitting at dinner or sitting like gathering. Like you guys made such a conscious effort, whether you know it or not, to gather us as a family and to just talk about literally whatever it may be, with fireplace, wood, evergreens, mint, food, our love lives, whatever. Like you made such a conscious effort to like gather us together and get us all talking and communicating with one another that like there were so many times when I was like, I don't want to fucking talk to you guys for 40 minutes at the end of dinner. I want to go play Polly Pockets upstairs and chew on their clothes. But
me and Kendall, yeah.
But now that I'm at my age, it's like those are the memories that I cherish the most, and those are the moments that I look forward to the most, which are like the rabbit hole conversations we get down, because I think as kids I'm trying to stay on track with the question, but like making a conscious effort to like talk to your kid and like making it like a ritualistic thing where like you talk to them after dinner or you're talking to them in the car, and like whether they like it or not, or whether they're showing they don't like it at that point, and maybe they won't, but like I think that they'll really appreciate that in the long run, because I know we all did.
I think though, like under the umbrella of honest communication, I think a massive part of that is vulnerability. Because I think watching my mom and dad grow up, like literally I've seen my dad and my mom cry and break down and not be strong and tell us what's going on in their life, how traumatic it is, how sad, how frustrating, how simple it may be, and absolutely like be on the ground sobbing, which I think for a kid is a little bit jarring at first to witness like your most idolized person as your parent be weak. But I think that watching our parents sit at the dinner table and bawl their eyes out because work didn't go well that day, or because they had a hard conversation with a friend, and being completely open and honest about it, just essentially made that possible for all of us to do the same.
That's really big. I think when you guys talk about honest communication, most adults forget that kids are truth tellers. And you also are lie detectors. And so when you say honest communication, what you're saying is you trusted us because what we were saying matched your felt experience.
In your actions.
In our actions. And I also think we tried very much to make sure that if either one of us were truly upset or frustrated or disappointed or sad, that you knew that it wasn't about you, that it was something going on in our lives, that you were not to blame for negative emotions that we were feeling. Is that true?
Yes. You were very outspoken about that. When like you would be in a bad mood or something, you would make sure, like even like the first thing you would say, I feel like when you would come in the room, is this is not about you, like this has to do with something else, and then you would continue to be a bitch, but it's fine.
We did do all right if the firstborn is actually saying that stuff. Normally it would just be the thirdborn that would pick up on that.
I love you guys.
I love you too. All right, here's another one. Now let's go to older kids, because I think most people are now like, because so far the takeaway for me is seek connection. Because people are going to want to know the how. Like, we're talking conceptually.
No, seek connection over correction is so big. So big. You will correct your kids through connecting with them.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. And
I'm not a parent, but
be vulnerable.
If you want your kids to be open with you, you have to model being open with them. And that doesn't mean sharing inappropriate things. Because I don't think you guys should have access to or know like the details about our marriage. Like that's for Dad and I.
Thank God.
And so I feel like you have to model openness. You have to talk about what's going on in your life. You have to talk about your feelings. You've got to show your feelings.
I think that you guys showing that like at times you are weak shows that you're human, and like makes, I don't know, like it gives us more space to do that too. 'Cause like okay, I'm going to stutter for a second until I get to what I'm saying, but like in being weak, in crying in front of us, like I think so many parents are so just try to look so strong and perfect in front of their kids all the time, but it's like by showing your kids that like you guys are also human, like allows your kids to feel those things too as they start to grow up.
I also think, like, I know so many of my friends till this day as a 23-year-old, a lot of them have been like, I've never seen my parents cry ever. And I think, and not saying that you need to walk downstairs and bawl your eyes out every goddamn day, but like, I just think that not showing your true emotion to your kids is sad and not real life, honestly.
Yes.
And
yes.
I think that hiding that away from your kids and putting on a smile every single day makes a kid feel like they can't have a bad day.
I also think that a lot of parents think they got to keep the stiff upper lip and they got to stay strong and they got to like be the one in charge because that's going to make the kids feel safe. And I actually think when you see your parents being human, it makes you know that you can count on them to be honest with you and that you can count on them to tell you,
Totally.
yeah, what's going on.
It's like honest feeling and communication. Like,
yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next question.
Okay.
But takeaway, don't be a dictator. Just be vulnerable.
Yeah, connection over correction. As a mom of 2 grown daughters and a son who's still at home, I feel very regretful. I wish I could have done things differently. And now I'm seeing my screw-ups play out in their lives, and it overwhelms me and brings me to my knees. And yes, I tell myself you did the best you could with what you knew, but that only gets me so far because I know in my gut I could have been doing things way differently. And yet I kept repeating the same things because I was stuck in patterns. How, as parents, can we find peace now that our eyes are wide open about the mistakes that we made and actually start building a bridge back to our kids again?
I think this is a question for the both of you.
Wait, no, I actually have an answer. I was going to say what
You put your mic.
I was going to say tell them.
Yes.
Tell your kids how you're feeling. It's never too late to like build a beautiful relationship with them. I know that like we're very lucky. I'm very lucky to be a part of the Robbins family, but like I don't think that like everybody on this podcast, everybody that's been requesting and sending in questions for my mom, like tell your kids you're feeling this way. That is the most important thing you can do. Like it makes them feel so much more seen when you just tell them, like, imagine how it would feel if you just told your kid, I want to connect with you and I feel like I fucked up a little bit in the past.
It's incredible, and I often think that the most profound advice is right in front of our face. And it's true. Like, instead of talking to your girlfriends or your spouse, go straight to your adult kids and say, like, I really regret that I didn't do more with your friends. I regret that I was not around as much as I would have liked to have been. I regret that we were struggling so badly financially that I couldn't afford to do those things. And so it does make me sad, but it's one of the reasons why I'm like, oh, note to self. Instead of trying to drag your kids closer to you, if you want to be close to your kids, go to them. Go to them where you said hobbies, Sawyer. Like, don't make them do the shit that you like to do. Go do with your kids what they like to do. Even if you don't like their friends, invite their friends to be with you, because then your child is going to want to hang with you.
I think also going off that, the perfect example that I can think of is like Oakley is really into video games and used to be a gamer. Well, he is a gamer, but like
used to be a big gamer.
Used to be a big gamer, and obviously my dad is not. He doesn't play video games, but he brought him to a video game conference, and they had an amazing time and bonded. And I think that was so special because I'm very aware that my dad is not sitting with Oakley playing video games for 8 hours every day, but the fact but the fact that he can like take you to a conference and bond with you that way, even though video games is not his top of mind interest, is the perfect example with diving into your kids' lives, even into something that makes you feel uncomfortable or just know nothing about. And so
you got choked up.
I would just like to say that I do not play video games for 8 hours a day.
Jesus Christ.
Can you
I have an
talk about
image
that
to uphold.
experience? Can
But
you
yes,
talk
no,
about
that was
experience,
honestly
please?
a really cool experience because I don't even remember like asking Dad to do that with me. Because like I remember Dad just coming up to me one day and being like, "Hey, there's this thing happening involving video games." What was
I
I?
think it's called like anime.
No, it's called. I think it was called. What was it called? PAX East. I think so. It was called PAX East. My dad was like, "There's this thing like involving video games. You want to go?" And I was like, "Yeah, like I want to go with you. Like that'll be so much fun." And so I remember we just like went. We walked around and we like looked at all these booths and we like played games together and like it was a really cool and like fun experience. And I definitely will always remember that. And it was like. It was really cool seeing him take interest in my life. Like that like felt nice because it also made me feel like what I was doing was like okay. Like there wasn't something wrong with what I enjoyed because like he was willing to be like, well, let's go do something about that, which felt really nice at the time.
We are going to talk about the 3 things that you need to accept about other people. These are things I need to accept too. These are not easy things to accept, but trust me, when you accept these truths, the 3 truths about other people, it's going to make your life easier. And I'm excited to talk to you about this topic because it's very clear based on the number of questions that you have submitted at melrobbins.com about other people. Mel, how do I get my spouse to change? Mel, how do I get my kid to change? Mel, how do I inspire my team? Mel, what do I do about this person over there and that person over here? Or there's a different version of this question you've been asking too, which is, as I'm changing, why are my family not that supportive? Why is it that as I make big changes in my life, like I'm not getting the support that I deserve? Why is the people around me not joining in on all these positive changes I'm making that are inspired by this Mel Robbins podcast thing? Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to handle that today because it's clear that you need more advice, you need more inspiration, and you need more Mel Robbins on this topic about how to deal with other people. And there's something else. I need more of something. I need more of you. And so what you're going to hear today is you're going to hear listeners of the Mel Robbins podcast asking questions on this topic. And we are going to jump in and unpack these 3 truths that you got to accept, I got to accept about other people. Now, before I tell you the 3 truths, I just want to say one other thing. I have been absolutely floored by your response to this show. And I want to thank you. I want to thank you for spending your time with me. And I also want to thank you for sharing this with the people in your life. I was in California the other day and I was ordering a sandwich at a deli. And this woman who made my sandwich, as she handed me over, you know, the little sandwich wrapped in the white after they put the little sticker on it, she leans forward and she says, "I didn't want to say anything, but I've been listening to your podcast. My sister shared an episode with me, and I just want to tell you something. I immigrated here as a little girl from Africa, and I feel like what I'm learning on this podcast," she was whispering. I don't know if she didn't want her colleagues to hear or her boss. Like, I didn't know why she was whispering, but she's whispering. And she had these big glasses on just like me. And she said, "But I feel like what I'm learning on this podcast, it's helping me sprout wings so I can fly and reach heights that I've always dreamt of." And I want to tell you, that is a shared success. You are helping me do that. Together, we are creating a positive ripple effect around the world. Together, we are inspiring people to dream bigger, to face obstacles and challenges, and most importantly, to feel a little less alone. And so I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for sharing these episodes with your friends, with your family. I want to thank you for posting it on social media because you just never know how sharing this stuff is going to change somebody's life. And I'm telling you right now, you are part of a force for good in this world that is empowering other people. And that's why I want you to know the 3 things that you have to accept about other people. Okay? And let me tell them to you right now. And then as we go through the questions, I am going to unpack these at a deeper level and explain to you that these truths, they're there no matter what issue you are dealing with. when it comes to other people. So, truth number one, if they wanted to, they would. Truth number two, you can't make somebody else change. You can make them dinner, you can make them laugh, but you cannot make someone else change. And number three, stop being mad that people aren't who you want them to be. Those are the three truths. They are hard to accept, but when you do, they make your life easier. And as we go through these questions one by one, and I not only give you more inspiration, more advice, more research about the specific issues in each question, I'm going to come back to these three truths over and over and over again and show you how accepting these three truths and applying them to all your relationships, it actually makes your life easier. And it's also easier on other people because what you're going to find out is because they apply not only to other people, but they also apply to you and me. So let's just take rule number one. If they wanted to, they would. Now, that kind of stings when you think about other people. When you think about folks in your life that, boy, I wish they'd make an effort. I wish they'd show up. I wish they'd reach out. I wish they'd try a little bit harder. I wish they'd get healthier. I wish they'd... Yeah, if they wanted to, they would. But guess what? It also applies to you. There are people in your life that wish you would make an effort, that wish you would change some aspect about you. And the truth about all of us is we do the things we feel like doing. And when it matters to you, you do it. And it is hard to accept the fact that if you want to know where somebody stands on an issue, watch their actions. That tells you exactly what they want to do and what they don't want to do. Do not listen to their words because it's easy to say, yes, no, I do this, I'll do that, to talk the talk, but talk is cheap. And so it is hard to accept that if they wanted to, they would. And the truth about you is if you wanted to, you would. And so I wanted to kind of like say this swings both ways. Everything that we're going to talk about is true about other people, and it's also true about you. And I like reminding both of us that because it gives you a level of humility and a little bit more compassion when you get into situations with people where they're not doing what you want them to do. That brings me to our first question from Lisa.
Hi, Mel. My name is Lisa, and I have a question for you. Mel, I am currently struggling with being a more tolerant person. I struggle with accepting others and their bullshit. We all have bullshit, and we all have to carry it, deal with it, and unload it. Don't get me wrong. I have worked on myself for years, trying to be better and do better. But damn, I want to scream sometimes. Just be better. I have had to deal with so much in life, but I've always wanted more for myself and my family, regardless of the shit that life serves up. Meeting people where they are in life is so important. I know and understand this, but my patience is tried when people wallow. Any advice, Mel?
Okay, I love this question, and I'm sure you can relate to it as much as I can relate to it. And before I dig into this, I want to divide Lisa's questions into two different topics, okay? So the first topic is her frustration that people don't want to do better. That's topic number one. Topic number two is how to deal with what's really irritating, which is people who wallow was her word. I say marinate, commiserate, just absolutely at some level love their bullshit. You know those people. Something's always wrong. They're always complaining. The weather's always bad, or they're always unhealthy. They're like, you know that kind of person. So let's start with the first part of that, which is this frustration that you hear in Lisa's voice. I just want them to do better. I've done better. There's almost like an arrogance and a judgment in that, right? That, oh, well, if I've fixed myself, you should fix yourself. If I can do this, then you should do this. And to me, that's toxic positivity. Just assuming that because you've done it, that somebody else should. And I'm emphasizing the word should, because should holds judgment. If you have the perspective that if I've done it, then you could do it too, that's inspiration. That's helping somebody. And so what you want to make sure that you're doing is that if you're frustrated, that you're coming from a place of love and coming from a place of wanting to help somebody rather than coming from a place of judgment, of the should, of the, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. Because we've all been on the receiving end of that, right? Where somebody's beaten you down because they've done something and they think you should do something. I can give you a really good example of this because I think there's a big difference of somebody being capable of doing something and somebody not being capable yet. As a person that is new to personal development, and I'm talking about myself, I've only known about personal development for just over 10 years. I am new to therapy. I mean, I've been engaged in therapy for a long time, but I feel like it takes a while to understand that there are certain things that a lot of people have never even thought about or been taught. I mean, I didn't bump into a lot of the topics that I'm talking about right now until I was in my mid-40s. For example, I'll give you one. I didn't truly understand trauma. When I heard the word trauma, I thought that was something that people that served in the military had. I thought that you had to be on a tour of duty and see absolutely something horrific or be somewhere where there's extreme violence or be the victim of a really violent crime. I did not realize that there's big T trauma and there's little t trauma. I didn't realize that growing up in a household where you experience emotional abuse, or you have parents that are distant or mismatched, or maybe you experienced a childhood where there was a lot of poverty or there was discrimination. These are all forms of trauma. I had no idea. And so there are people in your life that would love to change, but they can't right now because they don't even understand that they are trapped in some kind of a trauma pattern. They're not aware of it. There are people in your life that would love to have the level of fitness that you have, love to have the level of discipline that you have, but they're not capable of it right now because they maybe are struggling with depression, or maybe they don't have the family structure around them that is supportive that you have, or maybe they didn't have the experiences that you've had in your life that have allowed you to develop the habits that you've had. And so I think it's really important when you start to feel yourself frustrated with other people to check your ego and to ask yourself, well, am I in the lane of wanting someone to better themselves because I care about them and I see potential in them? Or am I in the other side of this, which is I'm being really judgy? That's where my frustration is coming from. And I'm assuming that somebody's got the resources and the ability and the support and the knowledge and all of the, motivation that you need in order to get started. And so I think it's super important, step one, that when you feel that frustration, when you feel yourself getting hooked, that you check yourself at the door. Do I want them to do this because I care about them? Or am I judging them and I think that they should do this because I think that what they're... When you get into that lane and you know it, you've got to take a breath. You got to recognize that you're coming from superiority. And I want you to step to the other side because understanding is an act of love. Being compassionate is an act of love. Being tolerant of where somebody is an act of love. I'm going to give you an example from my own life. So just this morning, Chris yelled at me. That's my husband. And I'm kind of embarrassed to admit what happened to you. Because boy, oh boy, I will tell you, if Chris heard Lisa's question, he would say, I'm struggling with being more tolerant of my wife, Mel. And so here's what happened. Our new puppy, Homie, is going to go to a puppy class. And in order to go to this puppy training class on Wednesday, he needs to be up to date on his vaccines, right? No problem. Because when we got our puppy, when he was 9 weeks old, I took him to the vet. He got all of his shots at week 12. And that was great. I'm a responsible pet owner. This is fantastic. Then all of a sudden the podcast launched and I've been gone. So Chris looks at me this morning and says, "Why didn't you tell me that homie is not up to date with his vaccines?" I'm like, "What are you talking about? I took him when we first got him." He said, "Mel, that was when he was 12 weeks old. He's almost 20 weeks old, Mel. He's missed 2 veterinarian appointments. He is 8 weeks late on getting his vaccinations." I'm laughing because I feel so bad. And I said, "Well, and he's like, didn't you make follow-up appointments?" I said, yes. Where's his folder? That came with him when we got him as a puppy. I borrowed a Sharpie from the vet when I was checking out, and I wrote the dates in there. And sure enough, we got the folder out, and there were the 2 dates. We have missed both of those appointments. I never put them in the calendar. Chris took the folder, and this is a man who never gets upset. He took that folder, you guys. He slammed it shut. He slammed it against his desk. He stood up. He didn't even wheel around on his chair. He stood up. The chair rolled away, and he said, "Mel, don't give me this ADHD shit. I know you have a lot going on, but you have a living and breathing animal that you are supposed to be taking care of. This is not acceptable. You have to do better." And there's the dog barking on cue. Apparently he agrees. I can't make this up. Everybody hates me right now. Yeah, and here's the thing, I know that Chris wanted to scream. Chris did scream at me, "Just be better." And I know that I'm now going to get flooded with comments and emails about this. I'm okay with that. I know I'm going to get a lot of advice about ADHD. I know I'm going to get advice about supplements. Now that you're hearing this story, I'm going to get a lot of you that think I'm a terrible pet owner. I'm cool with that. This is what actually happened this morning. And here's what I had to say to Chris. I want to do better. I don't think I can right now. I am so busy at work. I do not have an assistant. I am terrible with the calendars. I'm actually impressed that I wrote the dates down that they gave to me. I thought I put them in the calendar, Chris. But my brain is dropping balls left and right. And so the reason why I'm telling you this story is I'm not letting myself off the hook. I am motivated to try to figure out how to improve the systems that I have and improve the level of support that I have, because I don't want to be dropping these balls. Chris doesn't need to get frustrated at me for me to feel like shit about this. Of course I want to do better. But this is one of those instances where my brain doesn't work like his. I can't just, Chris is Mr. Foundational Operations guy. Chris methodically sits and organizes and can sit still. He's really good with tech and with Excel spreadsheets. I am the opposite. I am absolutely the opposite. And so the reason why I'm telling you this story is because I guarantee you have somebody in your life that, my gosh, you just want to bang your head against the wall. And you can tell yourself if they wanted to, they would. And that's true for some things. It is true. It's true for whether or not people want to show up at an event. It's true for whether or not people reach out to you. It's true for whether or not people make an effort. It's true for whether or not people are engaging in healthy habits. If they wanted to, they would. And then there are some times that it's really important in your life, in order to manage your own frustration, to be a little bit more empathetic. That if they could, they would. And I'll tell you, I am motivated to get the support that I need so that I do not drop balls like this, because I want to do better. And having Chris yell at me, it was actually kind of helpful this morning, because it just allowed him to be frustrated. It allowed me to see that this really is a big deal, because he keeps picking up the slack on my behalf. And that's not a great solution either. And so here's kind of where the takeaway is on that. At the end of the day, it's about managing your energy. And when you allow somebody else's consistent behavior, I'm not talking about stuff where people are breaking the laws or they're addicted to something or, something that's super, super destructive. But I've been married to Chris for 26 years and I've been this forgetful. I've been this forgetful and this bad the entire time we have been together. This is not new Mel Robbins. I am definitely overwhelmed with the launch of this podcast and the move to Vermont and all the travel recently and not having an assistant right now. But this is standard. I have wanted to change this my whole life, and I'm trying, man. And a little bit of empathy and support goes a long way. Because if you don't give that to the people in your life, if you're not more tolerant of the things that they're not capable of, they're just going to feel demoralized and ashamed. And so, yes, if they wanted to, they would. And make sure that if it's a situation where they can't really, or it's really hard for them, that you bring a little bit more empathy because that's going to help them. The other thing is, let's go to number 2. You can't make someone else change. So I think this is super important because if you get as frustrated as Lisa's getting, you can feel like Chris is, you can't make someone change. You just can't do it. Yes, you can make them dinner. You can make somebody laugh. You can make requests. You cannot make someone change. And so I'm going to tackle this in 2 ways. Do you know that Chris and I have come back to this issue of Mel's forgetfulness over and over and over and over again? And I'd say about 15 years ago, we made a decision because I am terrible with logistics and I am notorious at dropping balls and I am the queen of good intention. I am the queen of good intentions and I often lack the follow through. And I'm talking simple stuff. Like literally, here's another example. We are going to a holiday party. I think it's on the 17th of the month. And a friend of mine texted me and said, "Are you guys going to this party?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Great. We're going to have people over for cocktails first." I said, "Great." Given that Chris and I had just fought about the dropping of the ball of the veterinarian appointment, I immediately screenshotted her text and sent it to my husband, Chris, and said, "Honey, I don't want to forget to write this in the calendar, so I'm telling you so that you can make sure that we know and remember to go to this." That is what our system has been forever. So what's interesting is that you've got 2 choices when it comes to somebody and their behavior. The rule you need to remember is you can't make them change, which means you either have to stop trying to make them change, or you need to figure out how to show up differently to make up for what they're doing wrong or to support them in an entirely new way. And so we already had a solution for the fact that this is an issue that I cannot change. And the solution is Chris is the point person for all things. If you want us to show up, go to Chris. If you need a check written, go to Chris. If you need to make sure that it's in the calendar, go to Chris. If the kids need a whatever it's called, like you know how kids always have that exam that they need before they go to sports? What's that called? Like the annual wellness check? Thank you. You know how kids need an annual wellness check? Guess when Mel Robbins realizes they do? The day it's due. That's right. So if you do not want to have that kind of emergency, go to Chris. But what you have to accept in your life is that you're not going to make someone else change. I'm super motivated to be better, but Chris can't make me do it. I have to be the one to do it. And so you know what you're doing when you put energy into being frustrated about other people who either won't or can't make that change you want them to make? You're just burning energy. Imagine if you took all that energy that you're frustrated at other people and you just poured that energy in a positive direction to make your own life better. I often think about how many years of my life I have wasted being frustrated with other people. Truly. Wishing they would change, wanting them to change, trying to make them change. I've tried manipulating people. I've tried bribing people. I've tried, I'm talking with like a box of Legos or something. I've tried motivating people. I've tried inspiring people. The fact of the matter is, you can do all those things. But if somebody doesn't want to, they won't. If somebody can't, then they won't. So Yes, make them dinner. Yes, make them laugh. Yes, try to be compassionate and understanding. But all of that energy and frustration that you can hear in Lisa, I want to scream sometimes. I'm sure you do, because you're trying to make them change. That's why you're frustrated. And that brings me to the third rule. You got to stop being mad at people for not being who you want them to be. I will never be an accountant. I will never be somebody who is OCD detail oriented. That's not me. My genius is in being creative. It's in connecting with people. It's, flying by the seat of my pants. That's my genius. And somehow Chris and I have made it work for 26 years. And I think it has to do with the fact that we are 99% compassionate, understanding, and supportive of one another. And then there's those 1% moments that happen today over me being a dumbass about the new puppy. And of course, I feel terrible about it, but I will never be Susie Q with the calendar. That's just not who I'm supposed to be in life, and that's okay. But I can be more responsible about getting the support I need so I don't leave other people in breakdown. And we are going to get into boundaries because I know you're already going to, well, what do you do, Melvin? We will get there. But I want to address one other aspect of Lisa's question, and it's this.
Meeting people where they are in life is so important. I know and understand this, but my patience is tried when people wallow. Any advice, Mel?
I'm going to give you a specific tactic for people who wallow. I call this the 6-month rule. The people in your life get 6 months to wallow in anything. They have 6 months to wallow about the divorce. They have 6 months to wallow about the weight they've put on. They have 6 months to wallow about the job they lost or the circumstances or the weather or whatever else. And once the wallowing passes the 6-month mark, you have a boundary to draw, okay? And this boundary works like a frickin' charm because, number one, if they don't want to, they're not going to change. You're just going to wallow. Number two, you can't make them change, so don't even try. And number three, you got to stop being mad about this person not being a person that you want them to be. But you can draw a boundary. And you want to hear the boundary? It's the 6-month rule. Here's what you say. So-and-so. I'll give you an example from my own life. So I have a friend that got a divorce after a really it was like, one of those divorces is just ugly. Just ugly, ugly, ugly. And the divorce was finalized, okay? This friend of mine, every time I saw her, constantly complaining about the ex and the this and the that and the other thing and the other thing and the other thing. And finally, after 6 months, I looked at her and I said, you are no longer allowed to talk about this in front of me. I have recommended therapists. I have been a good friend. I have given you books to read, all of which you have done nothing about. I am no longer available to be a soundboard for your wallowing because it is clear to me that you don't want to do anything about this. The second that you would like to change this, I am here to support you. I am here to help you, but I am not available for you to stay stuck. I care about you too much. So if you'd like to go complain to somebody else, please do, but you are not allowed to bring this person's name up. You are not allowed to talk about your marriage, your ex-marriage, your ex, any of it. I'm not available for that anymore. And an interesting thing will happen. That person will be mortified, and they probably won't call you for a while because they're still addicted to their wallowing. You're not trying to change them. Isn't that interesting? You're not trying to change them. You didn't say stop wallowing. You said, I'm not available for it. So you know who changed in that relationship? You did. You changed what you're available for. Now, Chris could literally say to me, you're not allowed to take the animals to the vet unless I'm with you. You're not allowed to make travel plans. You're not allowed to respond to invites. He could say that to me and draw a boundary. He's not asking me to change. He's basically changing how he shows up with me, which is basically what he did about 15 years ago. And it solved most of the issues. So I want you to understand that when you understand and you accept these 3 truths about people. If they wanted to, they would, unless they can't. Number 2, you can't change anybody. And number 3, stop being mad at people for not being who you want them to be. You take all the power back. None of this says you can't change. And so when you get frustrated by somebody else complaining, cut off access to the complaining. You're not saying I don't love you. You're actually saying the opposite. You're saying I love you so much that I'm not going to be a part of you staying stuck. And as long as I listen to this garbage come out of your mouth, you are going to be stuck. I'm not here for it. I'm here for your transformation. I am here for you creating a better life. I'm here for you moving on. I'm here for you no longer giving airtime to this asshole that you're divorced to. I am here for your future. I am no longer here for your past. When your friend is ready to change, guess what? They will, because they will want to. Remember, that's rule number 1. If they wanted to, they would. And, one of the things that I want to say before we move on to question number 2 is that I think a lot of us learn that part of a relationship is struggle, that there's conflict, that there's tension, that you've got to have somebody to fight against or push against, that you saw these patterns growing up, or they have been patterns in friendships or relationships. And so you're just kind of used to this push-pull. Well, what if I told you that it doesn't have to be that way? That maybe if you're in relationships that feel like a lot of work, that's a sign that the relationships that you're in are no longer working for you. And one of the fastest ways to get rid of the struggle is drop the rope. Now, what does that mean? So think about tug of war. When you are playing a game of tug of war where you're on one side of the rope and, you got other people on the other side of the rope and you're pulling back and forth and it's a lot of effort and pulling, yanking. You want to know the best way to win tug of war? Literally, as somebody goes to yank backwards, let go of the rope. They fall on their ass and then you yank the rope back towards you. Who said that's not fair? Of course that's fair. Letting go of the struggle often makes the struggle go away. And so notice that Lisa's question was, Mel, I'm struggling to be a more tolerant person. And so the way you become more tolerant is accept those 3 things about people. If they wanted to, they would. If they could, they would. Number 2, you can't make them change. Number 3, stop being mad at them for not being who you want. And then you've learned some other things. Doesn't mean you can't change. Doesn't mean you can't draw boundaries. Doesn't mean you can't say, you can do all this stuff you want, but don't do it in front of me. I have another example of that. I have a friend who is dating somebody and she adores him, absolutely adores him, and then confessed to me, but when he goes out with his guy friends, they gamble and he does coke and I'm not down with it. I'm like, don't tell me. Tell him. You're not going to change him, but you can tell him, I got a boundary. Don't you do that around me. That'll make somebody think, because you're following the 3 rules. You're not trying to change them, but you're very clear about what your values are and what's good for you. Not asking. You didn't say don't do that. You said don't do it around me. Big difference. That makes somebody stop and think, doesn't it? It's going to make somebody question, well, what am I doing? If this person I really care about doesn't want it done around me, maybe I should start thinking about what I want done around me. I like it because it's sneakier and it's the truth. And it works with these 3 rules.
In doing this work, I was able to see myself grow, not only by my daily actions, but also by the way I started to think. One day, my wife and I were chatting in the kitchen, and she actually said to me to stop acting like I'm on a pedestal, a selfish Mr. Know-It-All, which I had no idea I was doing. So this got me thinking perhaps my change was affecting her, and for some reason I felt I was at fault. Can you speak specifically to your transition from being a regular parent to being Mel fucking Robbins, and how you overcame the family shakeup and what was all happening around that time? Thank you.
Whew. Okay, this is a great question. So one thing first, how I went from being just like a normal person to quote Mel Robbins, there was not like some overnight thing that happened. I have gone, I am who I am today because of the work that I've done over probably a decade. Like, this is not like I won the lottery and I went from being broke to being a millionaire. This is, I went from being nearly bankrupt and basically a drunk on the verge of divorce in 2008 to 14 years later, meticulously one foot in front of the other, slowly changing, slowly learning about myself. And so my family has had the benefit of seeing a slow, sometimes so tedious evolution, because that's what true change is. It doesn't happen overnight, it happens over time. But what you're talking about is really important for us all to understand. And this is one of the most common questions that I get. Doesn't matter who you are, what kind of change you're making. The fact is, when you make a change, you create ripples that hit other people, whether you intend to or not. And this thing that I'm about to explain to you is so life-changing. And I didn't see this for a long time. I was guilty of being the kind of person that it sounds like you may be, that when you're really excited about something, you become a huge cheerleader. Let's all go gluten-free. Let's all become vegan. Oh, the best thing in the world is keto. Oh, you know what we should do? We should take this seminar. We should all exercise. We should do this. We should do that. You should become an entrepreneur. I became like a just big advocate. And when you do that, it can come off to other people like you think you're better than them. Now that you've quit smoking or you've quit drinking or you suddenly don't eat animals because you're a vegetarian. That sounded terrible. Now that makes me want to be a vegetarian, honestly, when I say it that way. But you know what I'm saying. And so let me explain why that happens. Okay. Number one, everybody, any change you make impacts any relationship you're in, because relationships are about energy and relationships are also about overlapping patterns. And if you think about that, it's true. The people that you feel closest to in terms of your friend group are people that you click with. It also happens that you probably have a lot of overlapping patterns, whether it's you have patterns of interest that overlap, or you work together and that overlaps, or you have kids the same age and that overlaps, or you live in the same neighborhood and that overlaps. And so it's this energy and this pattern thing. The second you change anything in your life, energy shifts and patterns change. And that means every relationship's going to change. And that's not anything you can avoid. It's a fact of life. If you decide that you suddenly want to launch a side business, all of a sudden you're not going to have time on Saturday nights to hang out with your buddies playing poker. It's a fact, because you're going to be interested in working on your side business. And as you work on your side business, you're going to start meeting other people that do the same kind of business. And because you are interested in that, you're going to be spending more time with them. Patterns change. I want you to accept that as a fact. It doesn't mean anything's wrong. But let's talk about the issue that you're facing with your wife, okay? Because this is what you need to understand about other people. Your changes do not inspire other people. They confront them. I'm going to say that again. Your changes do not inspire other people. They confront them. And I'm going to give you a famous example from my marriage. I am once again the jerk in the story, and Chris is the winner. There's no winners. That was me being funny. Chris is the transformed one. I'm the jerk, okay? So a couple years ago, Chris made this decision that he was going to stop drinking for a while. And I was so excited for him. He had had a major problem with alcohol as the restaurant business was really struggling. It was basically the way that he dealt with his stress. And so when he got out of the restaurant business, he's like, I got to make major changes. I got to stop drinking. I need to get healthy. I got to figure out who I am and what I want to do with my life. And so he decided step number one, not drinking. I'm like, yes. I was a yes for about 2 days. And then by day 3, dinner time rolls around. And I had a habit of loving to open up a bottle of wine while I was cooking. And so day 1 and day 2, I did not do that. I was supportive of my husband's change. And day 3, I'm like, meh, I think I'm going to have a glass of wine. Just because he's not drinking doesn't mean I can't drink. And by the way, Chris was also amazing in that he wasn't like, I'm doing this, you need to do this. He's like, I'm doing this for myself. So I open up the bottle of wine and I'm cooking and Chris is standing there and the kids are running around and I take out the wine glass and I'm like, glug, 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 glug. And then I say, hey, would you like to have a glass? And he's like, nope. I'm like, you sure? I mean, it's basically just juice. You know, it's not that big of a deal. It's not like you're having some bourbon. He's like, no, I don't want any wine, Mel. I'm like, come on. And he looks at me, kind of like he did this morning, actually, with the veterinary story. He looks at me very frustrated and he said, Mel, I don't want to drink. Stop asking me to have a glass of wine. And I was like, whoo, you know, because of course, when somebody's serious with you, you're like, oh, you know, shoo. I told you I was a jerk. And then I said, I'm sorry. Sheesh, you know, I just feel bad because, you know, I feel bad having a glass of wine on my own. And then he said something that was a mic drop. He said, if you're concerned about what's in your glass, then maybe you should figure out your relationship to drinking. Because the fact is, Mel, nobody cares what's in your glass but you. And if me putting non-alcoholic seltzer in my glass makes you think about what's in your glass, then you've got some changing to do. And he's right. And this is my point. If somebody is confronted by your change, it's because your change is making them think about what they're doing or not doing in their own life. Just like Chris's decision to stop drinking made me think about my decision to have a glass of wine while I was cooking dinner every night. And here's the thing. He's right. Nobody gives a shit what's in your glass. But people who get confronted, it's easier for them to attack you or to get you to change your behavior than to take a look in the mirror and change their own. It's easier for me to question what Chris is doing than to look in the mirror and go, well, should I have a glass of wine? Maybe I don't want a glass of wine. Maybe it's just some dumb habit that I've had for 10 years and I don't really care about drinking wine. But now Chris is making me think about that. And it's a hell of a lot easier for me to question him than for me to question me. There's actually science around this. It's called my side bias. There is so much research about this cognitive bias. That's a fancy word for your brain has certain ways that it thinks that are totally screwed up, okay? And my side bias is what's called a true blind spot. It doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter how much money you have, how educated you are. My side bias impacts absolutely every single one of us. What does that mean? That means once we have an opinion about something, we will argue for our side no matter what. Once we select an ice cream flavor, we will argue that this is the best damn thing. Once we vote for a candidate, oh, that person, even though they suck and they disappointed me, I'm going to argue for that candidate. This is my side bias. Chris is going to argue that not drinking is the best thing on the planet, and I'm going to argue that there's nothing wrong with having a glass of wine. And here's the problem with my side bias. Number one, it prevents you by being defensive about your side. It prevents you from being open to other ideas, other possibilities. Maybe you don't want to have a glass of wine when you cook dinner. Maybe you don't want to be playing poker with your buddies in their garage every Saturday night. You really would like to get started on that real estate business you've been thinking about for years. But instead, we argue for our side. In fact, at the University of Toronto, there is a doctor. He's also a professor, Dr. Keith Stanovich. He's a psychologist that teaches there. He has done so much research on my side bias. He's considered the scientist when it comes to the field of cognitive science. And some of the research that I dug up as I was looking at this, because I was curious, why are we so resistant to change? Why is it that when a friend of ours wants to roll out of bed and go to the gym at 7 o'clock in the morning, we tend to roll our eyes instead of rolling out of bed with them? Well, it has to do with this my side bias. In fact, there's interesting research here, and this is why it's so important for you to do what Chris did, which is don't try to make somebody else change. Don't try to make them have the water instead of the wine. Don't try to make them positive when they're wallowing. Don't try to make them healthy when they're not. Because based on the research, when you give somebody a lecture, which is basically the way that it feels when somebody says, you should lose some weight. Maybe you're drinking a little bit. That's a lecture. Only 3% of people change when they feel like the change is being forced upon them. 3%. Those are not great odds. You want to know better odds? When they think it's their idea. 37% of people will change when they believe the idea came from themselves. That is so important because if you actually would love to see people in your life make positive changes, you have to operate so that they believe the change is their own. So let me go back to the example with Chris. So if Chris had told me that he thinks I have a drinking problem, I would resist that because of my side bias. I would argue, oh, no, I don't. But when he says, stop pressuring me, nobody cares what's in your glass but you. And if you're concerned about what's in your glass based on what I'm doing, then you need to think about what you should be doing, Mel. By asking that question and forcing me to think about my own behavior and my own choices, of course, whatever I do next is going to become my idea because he's forced me to think about what I actually want to do. So back to Dan. I'm sure, Dan, your wife feels judged. So first of all, apologize if anything that you've done in terms of your enthusiasm made your wife feel less than. Super simple thing to do. You can certainly invite her to participate with you, but do not tell her to. Do not lecture her about it. Do not force anything on her at all, because now you know only 3% of people ever change when they feel like the change is something somebody else wants them to do or is forcing them to do or is lecturing them about. So that's takeaway number one. Takeaway number two, you can ask your wife questions. Why does this bother you? What about what I'm doing inspires you? Is there anything that you would want me to change? Invite that kind of dialogue and you're going to open something up. Because if your wife or your spouse or your partner, your roommate, your friend, whatever, like let's take this broader than Dan's question. If somebody in your life is confronted by the changes that you're making, they're passive aggressive, they roll their eyes, this is normal. I want you to stop for a second and let's come back to a little bit of compassion. Your behavior sent a ripple that's making them feel triggered. And we know it's easier to question you than to question themselves. But trust me, if they're questioning you, they're also questioning themselves. And so remember the 3 rules. If they wanted to or if they could, they would. Number 2, you can't make them change. You can make them laugh. You can make them think. You can make them feel included, but you can't make them change. And number 3, please stop being mad that they're not who you want them to be. They may never be who you want them to be. Loving somebody means loving them where they are and where they're not. It means loving and accepting them for who they are and who they're not. Now, remember, you can have boundaries. You should talk to your wife about the ways in which you could talk about these changes that would be supportive to her. You can have boundaries with her, and she can have boundaries with you. Maybe your tone of voice is a little lectury, but she loves hearing about it. She just doesn't want to hear it as if it's a lecture, or if she has to participate, or if there's something wrong with her for not doing it. Chris, I have to say, handled this like a boss. He actually handled this like a boss in something going on right now. Every morning when that alarm goes off at 5:45, and I roll over to my left and I see that Chris is already up. He's already up and at 'em. And when I walk into the kitchen and I see his gallon jug of water, and he's already drunk a quarter of it, and it's only 6:15 in the morning. And at 6:30 a.m., after I've written in my journal and I've had my cup of coffee and I've set my intentions, and he's come in from his first workout of the day with our 2 dogs trailing behind, He doesn't say, you should be doing this. Why aren't you acting? Oh, you're up now? No. He's just focused on what's making him happy. And what's interesting is all these changes he's making, it is sending a ripple effect. You know what it's doing? It's making me go, I wonder what would happen if I got up a little bit earlier. Might be kind of nice to get up with him and take that walk with the dogs outside. Or, wonder what would happen if I exercised twice a day, if I took on this structure. And so the truth is, Chris made a change. It sent ripples through our marriage and our relationship, and he never said a damn word about it. The change itself is impacting me and making me think. So pretty cool how that works, huh? And one more thing, focus on you. Protect your energy, because when you protect your energy, you create peace in your life. And that is something that I want you to protect at all costs. You know, my mission is to empower you, inspire you, to be connected to you so that you feel like you want to do the things that are going to create a better life. You know, it's my hope that when you listen to this podcast, you think it's your idea to do these things. Like if I do that, we are both winning. If you then share this podcast, guess what? When your friends and family listen to me, even though it was your idea to send them the episode, they're going to think it was their idea. So I love the feedback that you're giving me, that you love sending these episodes to your friends and family, because it is sending the message that you know you can't send. And you're not alone. My kids don't listen to me either. If I try to tell Chris what to do or my brother what to do, we now know because of the my side bias, they're going to resist it. But when you listen to a podcast episode, I'm just getting the genius of this. You think it's your idea? I love that. And you know what? It is your idea. Because at the end of the day, you're the one who's responsible for your happiness. You're not responsible for keeping other people happy. You're responsible for your happiness and for creating the life that really lights you up. And when you bring more understanding and compassion to your relationships and you stop being mad at people because they can't do what you need them to do, trust me, you will be a happier person. Life will get easier. Hey, it's Mel. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed that video, by God, please subscribe, because I don't want you to miss a thing. Thank you so much for being here. We've got so much amazing stuff coming. Thank you so much for sending this stuff to your friends and your family. I love you. We create these videos for you, so make sure you subscribe. Mwah.